观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看今天的明镜连线。在越南河内举行的川金峰会结束了第一天的行程。在川金二会之前，外界对这次会谈的内容和成果有诸多猜测，关注重点在双方是否会实现朝鲜半岛无核化问题上再商量细节，以及会不会签订停战协约。据韩联社报道，28日的谈判中，两人可能将会面临5回合的谈判，其中包括2次的单独会谈，也不排除加场的可能性。那么，双方就核问题达成一致的可能性到底有多大？自在新加坡举行的第一次峰会以来，朝鲜的核威胁是不是有所减弱，还是原封不变呢？今天的明镜连线，我们请到了美国军备控制协会的防扩散政策主任凯尔西达文波特 Kelsey Davenport 与我们讨论。在我们的对话中，专家提到，自去年新加坡峰会以来，朝鲜其实没有采取具体的行动去实现朝鲜半岛的无核化。尽管金正恩自去年4月起就宣称会为实现朝鲜半岛完全无核化做出努力，但是实际上，专家说，朝鲜可能一直在继续扩大核武器库。专家还称，据统计，现在朝鲜有足够的材料去制造60个核弹头。这些核弹头制造成短程到中程的弹道飞弹，会把韩国、日本、中国和俄罗斯的部分地方包括在射程之内。但是专家提醒到，由于朝鲜比较少进行导弹测试，这个说法还有待确定。展望峰会的结果，专家认为，朝鲜要放弃核武器不太可能，因为国家把核武器看作保护国家安全和金正恩本身政权的必要工具。而对美国而言，结束韩战还是在谈判桌上的。此举可以被视为美国向朝鲜表示为和平未来做出努力的决心。另外，不管明天做的是什么决定，专家认为，如果美国不想重蹈覆辙，新加坡谈判成果不显著，要设置好后续的监督手段，一步步确认朝鲜能兑换诺言。专家还提到谈判的一个关键点——宁边原子能研究中心。他认为，该中心是朝鲜在发展核武器的关键所在，因此，美国应该采取措施确保宁边去武器化。同时，为了让朝鲜方心甘情愿签条约，应该取消一部分的对朝鲜的制裁，并且确保把韩国的意见也包括在这项协议里面。以下，请听我和达文波特的讨论。So since the last summit in Singapore, it seems that both sides have agreed on working to a complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So, Kelsey, have we seen any progress or actions being taken since then to achieve that goal?
Since Singapore, we've seen North Korea take no concrete actions that actually advance denuclearization. And that's because Trump and Kim left the first summit without agreement on process to advance negotiations going forward. So at this second summit, it's critical to get negotiations back on track. And what the United States really needs to see out of North Korea is a commitment for concrete, verifiable actions that actually advance the goal of denuclearization. And in return for that, the United States should be willing to put something on the table. That might mean ending the Korean War or perhaps limited sanctions relief. And we have to pursue both denuclearization and building peace and security side by side if this process is going to be a success.
And since last year, have we seen Pyongyang actually taking any move to further develop ballistic missiles or nuclear material, something that is against the promise to denuclearize?
Well, North Korea committed in April to refrain from long-range ballistic missile testing and from nuclear testing. And that is an important commitment because it prevents North Korea from qualitatively advancing its nuclear arsenal. Certain testing is necessary to further develop missiles to ensure that those missiles are accurate and reliable. So that is a good step, and North Korea has abided by that. But since the Singapore summit, North Korea has really taken no action to advance denuclearization, and the country has also been free to continue expanding its nuclear arsenal. It's very likely that over the past year, North Korea has continued to produce nuclear material for weapons. And that's really unsurprising. North Korea committed to denuclearization in Singapore, but they didn't commit to any specific steps to advance that goal. And that's why it's critical at this Vietnam summit that the United States get a concession from North Korea that actually tests the country's intentions to denuclearize and actually begins to halt and roll back North Korea's nuclear weapons program.
Right. So let's help us put North Korea's nuclear power into perspective. So what are the nuclear weapons that North Korea currently possesses and how dangerous they can be?
Well, it's difficult to assess the exact size of North Korea's nuclear arsenal. North Korea has a number of covert facilities that are part of its nuclear weapons program that it uses to produce the material for weapons. But it's likely that North Korea has produced enough nuclear material for up to 60 warheads. The country probably has not weaponized all that material, meaning it hasn't taken it and turned it into actual usable warheads. A more reliable estimate of the number of warheads is about 20. Now, North Korea can take those warheads already and mount them on short and medium-range ballistic missiles. And that would put South Korea, Japan, parts of China, and Russia within range of a North Korean nuclear strike. In 2017, North Korea tested much longer-range ballistic missiles that put the entirety of the continental United States within range. But North Korea has conducted very few tests of these systems, so they're not likely to be reliable or accurate. So North Korea's ability to actually target the United States with nuclear weapons is still questionable at this time.
There are a lot of talks about the term denuclearization. Do you think both sides actually agree on a clear-cut definition of it?
I'd say it's quite clear that the United States and North Korea have different conceptions of what denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula constitutes. The United States is very focused on North Korea's nuclear weapons program and defines denuclearization as dismantling not only the nuclear weapons, but their means of production in a final and verifiable manner. So for the United States, that constitutes denuclearization. North Korea, however, looks at the term much more broadly. In addition to its own nuclear weapons program, North Korea includes the entire region and eliminating nuclear threats from the Korean Peninsula. So as part of the denuclearization process, North Korea wants to see the United States remove its nuclear assets from the region and remove personnel trained on nuclear weapons from the region. In addition, North Korea has called for the United States not to make nuclear threats as part of that denuclearization process.
Now, President Trump seems to be taking quite a slow approach. In a previous conference, he had said that he's in no rush to promote a denuclearization result, and he only wants that there is no further testing. What do you think this way of treating the summit entail?
Well, Trump administration officials have sent mixed messages about the scope and sequence and pace of the denuclearization process. And that's really problematic because it doesn't give North Korea a clear picture of U.S. intentions. So on one hand, negotiating a denuclearization agreement is going to be a complex, highly technical and time-consuming process. So it's worth taking the time to get the details right. A rush job that tries to dismantle the nuclear program too quickly, may miss critical components and may not be as thorough or as verifiable as really should be necessary. So on one hand, it's good that the United States isn't in a rush. However, the diplomatic stalemate that came after Singapore played to North Korea's advantage. It enjoyed the benefits that come with negotiating while still being free to expand its nuclear arsenal. So the United States still needs to act and negotiate with urgency to ensure that North Korea is actually taking steps toward denuclearization and that North Korea isn't just playing for time. So it's a difficult line to walk, but the United States, as I said, has to act urgently. We have to see steps coming out of this summit that are concrete and verifiable and roll back North Korea's nuclear program. But at the same time, we need to understand that denuclearization is a long-term goal. We're not going to get there overnight, and it's worth taking the time to get the details right.
Building up on that, what do you see as the appropriate steps that need to be taken by the states to reach this deal?
Well, as a first step coming out of Vietnam, the United States and North Korea may pursue the verifiable shutdown of the Yongbyon nuclear complex. North Korea raised this as a possible action last year, and I think it's critical that the United States follow through on North Korea's offer, because dismantling the Yongbyon complex, which is a key part of North Korea's nuclear program, would test the country's intentions to denuclearize. It would prevent North Korea from expanding its nuclear arsenal as quickly. So what we may see out of the summit that I think would be ideal is an agreement to pursue dismantlement of Yongbyon, and then a time-bound process for North Korean and U.S. working groups to come up with an actual sequence and set of steps to ensure that Yongbyon is verifiably dismantled. So that would, I think, be a critical first step in the denuclearization process that's realistic based on what both the United States and North Korea have said. In return for that, Washington needs to give something to North Korea that it wants out of the talks. That could be limited sanctions relief that allows certain inter-Korean projects to go forward. Those projects seem to be something that both South Korea and North Korea have put a premium on, and the United States needs to relax some of the sanctions relief to allow those projects to go forward.
Now, based on the history of North Korea developing nuclear weapons, does it seem likely to you that Kim Jong-un would actually give up his nuclear weapons and plans?
Well, North Korea is not going to give up its nuclear arsenal absent a transformation in the U.S.-North Korean relationship.
Right.
North Korea views nuclear weapons as safeguarding the survival of the country and the survivability of the Kim regime. So absent a change in the relationship, absent assurances to Pyongyang that Washington does not have any hostile intent towards North Korea, Kim Jong-un is not going to give up his nuclear deterrent. That's why a step-by-step process that exchanges actions for denuclearization with U.S. actions that advance peace and security is so important. So over time, if the U.S. can demonstrate that it is sincere about actually changing the relationship between Washington and Pyongyang, and convince Pyongyang that Washington has no intention to overthrow Kim or invade the country, North Korea, I think, will be more willing to take some of those steps to actually give up and dismantle its nuclear weapons program.
My last question would be, looking ahead, what do you expect would come out of the second day of the summit? Do you expect some sort of deal or agreement, and even the public has been guessing the end of the Korean War? Do you expect some sort of decisions on that happening?
Well, with Trump, it's always difficult to set expectations because he tends to go off script. But I do think we could see several concrete results come out of Singapore, or come out of the Vietnam summit, that do advance the goals of the Singapore document. For one, it does sound like the United States and North Korea may agree to an end of the Korean War. That would be a significant first step that demonstrates that the United States is sincere about a new relationship with Pyongyang that isn't based on threats. So that would be a positive step. I think we could also see the outlines of an offer on the Yongbyon complex with details on verification on the actual concrete steps going forward to be worked out later by U.S. and North Korean working groups. Another thing that we could see that there's been some speculation about is the opening of liaison offices in Washington and Pyongyang. I think that would be a critical step because it would give both countries more access to the others, which is going to be necessary as the diplomatic process advances. For the United States, for instance, it would give them a presence in North Korea that would help them better understand the North Korean position as negotiations commence and better access to North Korea. Vice versa, it would give North Korea better access to officials in Washington. So again, that's another step that we could see come out of this summit that could be critical in helping set up that effective diplomatic process that's going to be necessary to see the long-term goal of denuclearization through.
Anything else you want to add on this summit?
I just think it's important that the summit emphasizes substance over pageantry. The process cannot afford another photo op like Singapore with very little follow-through from both sides. So it will be critical in going forward, and when we assess whether or not this summit was a success, that we look to see whether it produced actions that were concrete and verifiable and set up the United States and North Korea well to continue these negotiations down the road.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kelsey.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
以上就是本期的明镜连线，感谢您收看明镜电视。